you really buying a car online on AutoTrader right now?
Really, I can get super specific with dealer listings and see cars based on my budget.
You can really have it delivered.
Or pick it up.
Mommy, look!
I think your kid is walking up the slide.
Really?
AutoTrader. Buy your car online. Really?
That's my cat Lulu. She's perfectly healthy, but I'm not waiting for issues to pop up. I'm feeding her new Purina One whole body support, proactive nutrition supporting her 5 key systems. It's Purina One's most advanced formula, helping us stay ahead at mealtime so we can stay ahead for a lifetime.
Purina One, a difference from day one. Try new Purina One whole body support. Just say, Alexa, add to cart.
Alexa, add to cart.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Content warning, this episode contains discussion of murder as well as sexual violence, including rape.
Well, as I'm sure all of you know, recently we've been doing some pretty extensive coverage on the murder of Scott Macklem by a man who now calls himself Temujin Kensu. It's a complicated case. We've gotten a lot of questions, so we decided we would take an episode to deal with some of those questions and have a discussion about them.
And thanks to everyone who submitted questions. We really appreciate you. My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
And this is The Murder Sheet.
We're a true crime podcast focused on original reporting, interviews, and deep dives into murder cases.
We're The Murder Sheet.
And this is the murder of Scott Macklem, the guilt of Temujin Kensu, Part 7. Questions. Well, I'll be honest, Anya, I always have a special fondness for easy questions. So I'm going to be kind and I'm going to ask the easiest question we got. And I'm going to ask it of you to give you a quick win in terms of coming up with an answer.
Well, thank you. I desperately need that.
Anya, we got this question. Are the two of you done covering this case?
No.
Well, if you want to, you can elaborate.
No, we're not done covering the case. We are done, for the time being at least, covering it on a weekly basis. We kind of hit the main points of the original case and the commutation hearing, I think, but there's going to be room for other areas of coverage. It'll require time and reporting, so I think it's going to be something we continue to do, just like how we check back in on other cases we cover extensively, like the Delphi murders or the Burger Chef murders. It will be part of the rotation. It's just not going to be weekly. I think it was important to cover this case in a weekly basis because it's a lot of information. It's a lot to unpack. So we wanted to kind of like get everyone up to speed. And now that we're sort of at that point where we are all up to speed together, we can kind of move forward there and kind of hit it where it comes up. We have a couple of different angles that we're working on, but sometimes reporting is a little bit like being some kind of fisherman. You put some lines out, you see what happens, and then you go forward.
Yes. So we are still working on this case, and this may be a good time for me to say this. We protect our sources. We are very careful to protect our sources, and this is one of those cases where there is a bit of fear, a bit of discomfort. We've reported on how these awful people, these Kensus, continue to harass people online who are connected with this case in any way whatsoever. And so a lot of people are understandably a little bit wary about coming forward and potentially subjecting themselves to that sort of harassment. And I can tell you, frankly, we've talked to a number of people behind the scenes who have been reluctant to come on the program for reasons like that. So I just want to extend an invitation. If you are someone who has some sort of connection to this case, or if you have a story to tell about this case or domestic violence or any of these types of issues, you can reach out to us and we can have a conversation. And we give you our word we would not use any of your information publicly without your permission.
Yeah, but it could help us understand the situation better. But we want to hear from you. We'll protect you. If you don't want to come on the show, you don't have to come on the show. You can just give us information. And when you say domestic violence, I think what we talked about earlier, Kevin, between you and I, was if someone, I think a lot of people don't understand like how domestic violence or domestic abuse happens, how sexual violence happens, why somebody would go back to somebody who sexually abused them. I think this can be an opportunity for an expert to come in and maybe talk about some of the aspects of this case to shed some light on that to further understanding. So if that's you and you're interested in that, let us know. We'd be happy to have you on. I just think it could be a good moment where we could all learn something about that, because I think sometimes the discourse around this case has been a bit lacking in that.
More than a bit. Let me move on to the next question. Can you guys do a clearer timeline, i.e., when did Crystal and Temujin get together, for lack of a better word? When did she leave him? When was the murder? So basically, Crystal met the man now known as Temujin Kensu in late April, early Mayish of 1986. She was the one who ended the relationship, not he, and she ended it in late June of 1986. The next really big event, well, actually, after she ended it, there were several incidents of stalking going on that summer. Sometime during the course of that summer, Temujin Kensu, moved, but he did continue this stalking behavior. And then we had the Halloween party. And at the Halloween party, there was the announcement that Crystal and Scott were engaged and expecting a baby. Temujin Kensu was possibly thought to have been at that party. And we know at the time of the murder, he, in his own words, by his own admission, says that he believed wrongly, of course, but he believed wrongly that there was a chance the child could be his. So the Halloween party and then the murder occurred on November 5th, less than a week after Halloween.
Right. So that hopefully gives people a little bit more context with the, the whole timeline aspect of it all, because I know that's helpful for people. And what's the information on the Halloween party where they're supposedly there together?
The information on this Halloween party, I found that in a police report that was dated January 28th, 1987.
Okay.
So just a few months after Halloween 1986, obviously.
So people are saying we believe that they're at the same party that night.
Yes.
Okay. Understood. So that kind of gives you more of a timeline. This all happened pretty fast over the course of a couple of months. Late spring into the summer and then fall, Scott is dead. And I think it's really notable that there is this announcement at a party about Crystal and Scott expecting, and then very shortly after that, Scott is dead.
Right.
So,
especially since, by his own admission, Temujin Kensu said that at the time of the murder, he believed that not only was Crystal pregnant, but she was pregnant possibly with his child. And again, that's not true. It's not Temujin's child. So the question is, how did he know on November 5th, 1986, that she was pregnant?
Yeah, and I want to stress that he admitted at the commutation hearing that he knew this. It's not like we're just putting, thoughts in his head. He said, yes, at the time of the murder, I thought this.
Yes.
So that's not up for dispute. We know he knew about this. So I think that's pretty significant.
Anya, here's another question. What do you make of Crystal's keys being found in the glove box of Scott's car?
Well, we know that Crystal and Scott both reported that their cars were being broken into, things were being stolen, things were being rifled through. In one instance, Scott's belongings were thrown on the sidewalk and a lawn. So to me, the presence of Crystal's keys, which she reported stolen her car was left out, and then she gets there and her extra set of keys are gone. She still has one set, but now she's missing this extra set. Those being found in the glove box of Scott's car after his murder is an interesting fact. I mean, I don't think it proves anything definitively, but if we also know that someone is harassing them and breaking into their cars, and we also know that Temujin Kensu had an obsession with Crystal's keys. He was constantly making her give him the keys so he can kind of control her. I think it's just another salient and interesting detail. I don't put too much significance on it, but it's another thing that kind of ticks the box with Kensu, I think, where it's like, okay, the guy who's obsessed with her keys and then is accused of murdering her fiance, and rifling through both of their cars. I don't know. It just seems interesting. But, that's kind of what I think.
Ask me a question.
Did Phil Joplin get a deal in exchange for his testimony against Kensu, in which he said Kensu made certain incriminating statements about the murder?
No. So Phil Joplin was a person who spent a short time in kind of a holding cell where Temujin Kensu was also in a holding cell. And he later testified that Temujin Kensu made incriminating statements to him about Temujin Kensu committing this murder. And over the years, Temujin Kensu, Team Kensu, as we call them, have made all sorts of claims about Joplin getting a deal or recanting. He never formally recanted. A defense investigator for Mr. Kensu prepared an affidavit which purported to be Mr. Joplin recanting in some detail and announcing details of this deal. Mr. Joplin never signed that affidavit, so I'm not comfortable putting too much weight on that affidavit. What I am comfortable saying is that when Mr. Joplin testified under oath, which he did on 2 occasions on this matter, he said there was no deal. And 2 of the prosecutors in this case, Ken Lord and Robert Cleland, prepared affidavits under penalty of perjury in which they said there was no deal. The only argument is, at the time he testified, Mr. Joplin had already been sentenced. And he, just for a short period, I believe it was just a few months, and then he ended up serving his sentence, not being sent back to prison, but rather being sent to kind of a halfway house. And Mr. Cleland, the prosecutor, said, I had nothing to do with that decision. I would speculate that the reason they sent him to the halfway house instead of back to the prison is it might have caused some security concerns to have a snitch being in the same facility with somebody he snitched on.
Right.
But if you want to believe that Mr. Joplin got a deal, you would need to believe that he lied about that under oath, told the truth about it when he was not under oath, and that 2 respected prosecutors also lied about it under oath. So you would have to believe pretty massive corruption, which is Temujin, Team Kensu, they certainly seem to lean in that direction. And I tend to think that if you require a big conspiracy theory with everybody being corrupt and lying, except for these brave people who tell the truth when they're not under oath, I think you have some problems.
That's a huge problem. I'm also going to add something to that. I'm going to say this. I think it's notable Phil Joplin and Temujin Kensu are not like cellmates in jail for months where Phil Joplin is pumping him for information, getting some key details, using that to his advantage. They are ships passing in the night. They are held for a few hours in a holding cell before a pre-trial situation, I believe.
Yes.
And this all occurs very close to the start of Temujin Kensu's trial.
I believe it was only days before jury selection began.
And so the state felt they had more than enough to go to trial without this guy, Phil Joplin. It was not the cinching of the case or anything. It was just yet another thing they added to it. So you have to believe that there's a massive conspiracy because, again, it's not like it's just we have a situation where, like, wily Phil Joplin is tricking the prosecutors to get something or, like, it's feeding them information that he got from Temujin. Like, And also,
because he's desperate to get into a halfway house.
Instead of prison for a few months, and I again, you have to believe that there's masochism, and you can't look at the Joplin situation and think that there's anything innocuous or bumbling or incompetent about the prosecutors. You have to say that they're part of the conspiracy. There has to be a conspiratorial angle to this, or it doesn't make any sense. And if you think there has to be a conspiracy, then I think that's something to, that's something to assess, because that's would require a lot of proof. And the fact that these prosecutors have said, no, this is what happened, and no one's ever been able to raise, oh no, the prison officials say that, Cleland was pushing for this. I don't, it's weak. It's very weak. When we started the murder sheet, we didn't really know if podcasting was even going to work out for us in the long run. Like, what if no one listens to us? That would be awkward. I'm really glad we tuned out those doubts and went for it, because it's been an absolute dream come true. But the kind of uncertainty we face is what stops people from betting on themselves, chasing their dreams, and starting their own businesses.
For all of you out there looking to kickstart your own dreams, partnering with Shopify is one of the best decisions you can make. It gets you on the right track from day one. They take the uncertainty out of business.
Shopify is your one-stop commerce platform that supports millions of businesses around the world.
Shopify makes you efficient and fast. You can upload new products, improve existing products. Shopify's AI tools can help you with product descriptions, page headlines, and better product photography.
And don't worry about nobody buying your products. They help you get the word out. Shopify puts the power of a whole marketing team behind you. You can create email and social media campaigns with just a few clicks.
Shopify supports you with inventory management, international shipping, processing returns, and more. Whatever the challenge, they're there to make things quicker and more convenient. It's time to turn those what ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/msheet. Go to shopify.com/msheet. That's shopify.com/msheet.
Are you really buying a car online on AutoTrader right now?
Really?
At a playground?
Yeah, really. Look at these listings from dealers.
Wow, your search can really get that specific.
Really?
And you just put in your info and boom, car's in your budget.
Mom needs a second, honey.
You can really have it delivered?
Really? Or I can pick it up at the dealership.
One sec, sweetie.
Mommy's buying a car.
Mommy,
I think your kid is walking up the slide.
Kyle, again? Really?
AutoTrader. Buy your car online. Really?
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
And can I also say that this isn't evidence. This isn't, I'm not saying this is concrete. We're just talking now. We're just talking as people. When you look at Kensu's posts, he's a prolific poster nowadays on the internet. And you look at the way he talks to people. When you look at his letter to his daughters that I read in a previous episode that went on for like 30 minutes. When you look at that and the way he communicates with people, and then you look at what Phil Joplin testified to as far as what Temujin Kensu was telling him about and just sort of info dumping, it fits.
It fits.
Now, I mean, like, again, this is a situation where I'm not saying that's an evidence or of anything. I'm just saying sometimes the truth tends to hang together pretty well.
Yeah, that's a great point. The truth hangs together very well, and you start finding things to support the truth even in unexpected places. And I'm going to digress just a bit to mention some of the most. That commutation hearing was so full of upsetting testimony. But some of the testimony I found particularly upsetting came from Mr. Kensu's daughter, and she described things like how he assaulted her during a prison visit and some other things. And you might say, well, what kind of support do we have for this? That's one of the things Team Kensu always says. Basically, yeah, sure, a lot of people say he's terrible, but they're all lying. But the truth holds together, and you find corroboration for it in unexpected ways. I remember also in that testimony, Mr. Kensu's daughter said that Mr. Kensu's then wife was upset with her relationship with him and was contemplating filing for divorce. And since that episode's come out, one of many things we've discovered is that she did indeed file for divorce before she died. And that is something I find very interesting, and it supports the credibility of Mr. Kensu's daughter.
It does. These things add up. And it's like, again, I'm not saying we have to be like, oh, well, it matches, so that's it. It's just another thing to add to the pile. To me, it's not something that's particularly weighty. It's like if I was in a holding cell for one of my many serial heists and somebody told a story where it was like, oh, the execution of George Kendall in 1607 Jamestown came up, and Anya shrugged her shoulders and said, well, I don't know, can we talk about something else? Like, that wouldn't hang together if you know me. But if you do know me and, oh, she went off on that and started ranting about it and saying, like, she has all these weird conspiracy theories about it, that would hang together pretty well based on people who've talked to me and who know me. So, I'm just saying, like, I believe Joplin under oath. I think Joplin, who is not under oath, was ticked off at St. Clair County and probably tickled by the idea of getting attention from these reporters who were basically trying to promote innocence fraud.
And I have no idea what he may or may not have said to this defense investigator who prepared the affidavit, which Mr. Joplin refused to sign. I would have to imagine if Mr. Joplin refused to sign the affidavit, he must have had some reason not to.
We've had a situation, actually Burger Chef brings this out in a certain, in people who we encounter through that, where people will talk our ear off about, oh, this guy must have confessed, and I saw this guy bloody on the night of the murders. And then you say, well, are you going to make a statement to police? Oh, no. Because it's like, they're just BSers. Like, they're just, they're going to BS you, and it's fun for them, and they're telling a yarn, but, it's not something they actually want to put on the record because they know on some level that they're full of it and they'll get in trouble. So I guess, yeah. I mean, I think it's understandable why people wanted to look at Phil Joplin allegedly recanting. That's understandable. That's something that it is good for the Kensu side to look into. But to kind of hold it out as this huge deal all these years later is just, it doesn't add up.
I'm going to ask a question now, Anya, which I suspect both of us might have things we want to say about this one. This is a question we got. What do you think of people who say the real killer would be found if we looked more at Scott Macklem's background?
Well, I think that's an understandable way to look at a crime. Look at the victim's background and look at who might have a problem with that person. And they did, and it was Temujin Kensu. So...
yeah, there is some sort of myth, and I'm going to say it's a stupid myth, that no one in the course of all the decades since 1986 has ever looked at Scott Macklem's background. He has been thoroughly investigated, including by Mr. Kensu's own defense investigators, who I'm going to assume are competent and good at their jobs. You heard us talk about our exchanges with Herb Welser, a professional investigator who's been looking into this case for a long time. We asked him, any evidence Scott was involved with drugs? Any evidence that he did nefarious things? No evidence whatsoever. These people are desperate to find something that they can pin on Scott Macklem. They want to drag this 20-year-old young man's name through the mud. They want to attack him and they want to vilify him, all in the cause of trying to get his killer out of prison. And I find that tremendously offensive and upsetting.
I look at it in a maybe a slightly different way. I think you do need to really look into a victim's background, and you might find some things that are not so flattering.
You're right.
So we're in agreement on that. But
at some point, you stop. At some point, you say, we've looked, there's nothing there.
If you have a bunch of people who are motivated to find anything negative on a guy because it could clear their client, for lack of a better word, looking for decades, we're talking about decades at this point, and they find nothing but just people with an agenda vaguely insinuating, like, like Paula Kensu saying, well, I heard he was in drugs. Well, Paula, no one cares about what you heard about because you do anything to further, your husband's cause. Like that is like, let's look. I mean, like, it's like if you have a bunch of bloodhounds, or hunting dogs searching the forest for a fox to find. And they're running everywhere and they're going all around. And this is happening for years and years and years and years. They don't get anything. At some point, you got to say, well, maybe there's nothing there. Maybe the fox is not in that forest. And maybe Scott was just a normal guy who was a student at a community college who liked to play golf and was not into crimes. Maybe the thing that his victimology points to is that he fell in love with a woman who had been abused, raped, and stalked by a guy with antisocial personality disorder who saw her as his property and saw Scott as an existential threat to him obtaining his property, Crystal, and the baby she was carrying. This man sees his children as extensions of himself. It's just a narcissistic relationship with these kids. And for him, the ultimate weakness, the ultimate being dominated by another man would be some other man raising his child. Some other man getting with his woman, his property. So, yeah, I think the victimology does tell us who killed Scott. It was the guy who was stalking him and threatening him for months before he was murdered. Imagine that.
Yes. I think it's very, very clear. And this family has gone through an unimaginable loss. There is a child that never got to know a father. It's horrifying. And I would hope people would stop smearing Scott Macklem's name until and unless you can come up with evidence that he actually did do something nefarious. And I don't believe he ever did.
Yeah.
I think it's time to move on from this.
Drop it unless you got something. Put up or shut up.
Temujin Kensu took this young man's life, and now Team Kensu is trying to take away his reputation.
Yeah, it's not right. I really strongly feel like you should not be getting into vague insinuations. You should be getting into where the evidence is. The evidence is that he was a normal dude, not doing crimes. Very much unlike Temujin Kensu. So, I don't know. I think he was he just crossed, he like Crystal, they crossed paths with the wrong person. And for a lot of people, Temujin Kensu was that wrong person. Not all of them, they didn't end up dead, but he hurt a lot of people along the way. And I think he was escalating over time. I think he felt like he was untouchable. I think he felt like he was smarter than everyone else, which is, we're going to talk about, it's not true.
Anya, who were those two mysterious men stalking Scott? And what is the incident that is being discussed there?
An incident that is misinterpreted, or kind of misinformation is put out there. And I think most of the people who are putting out the misinformation, they're not trying to mislead anyone. I think they're just confused. And I think this is one of those talking points that's gotten repeated so many times by people.
Well, I'll say, I think some of the people who put it out are trying to confuse.
Okay, that's true. But I think others are just more of like, oh, I heard this, and this makes me, think he's innocent. This incident is discussed where two men are said to have gone to Scott's workplace and lurked around, and Scott made comments to a coworker saying, like, these people are, like, I need to avoid this. And basically kind of the sense was that they were going there to start a confrontation with Scott. Scott hung back. They left without incident, but it was this kind of incident that's like, okay. And what the Team Kensu side says is that we don't know who those men are. Who are those mysterious men? They were stalking Scott. Maybe he had other enemies. Okay. When you frame it like that, yeah, that sounds like he might have other enemies. But the problem is that they were identified, or at least one of them was identified as Temujin Kensu.
Yes.
We know that was Temujin Kensu because Scott said that.
And because one of the people who witnessed the encounter later identified one of the people in the store is Temujin Kensu. So it is technically true to say we don't know who those two people were, but it is true to say we know who one of them were.
Yeah, didn't Scott say something like that one of the guys was like, had a thing with Crystal and was being really weird about it or something like that.
Yeah, and again, one of the employees later looks and identifies Temujin Kensu.
So we know that there's no mystery there. There's no other stalker. I mean, I'd be curious to know who the guy with Temujin Kensu was, I guess. But I mean, it's one of his friends. It's one of his little lackeys. You know, I mean, it's not. It's connected to the Temujin Kensu stalking. It's not connected to anything else.
Yeah, one thing to give Temujin Kensu credit, one thing he is good at is attracting lackeys and people to do his bidding.
Yeah.
And he continues to do so.
I don't know why, but he does have that. He does have that skill for some reason. But yeah, it's like, again, this is something where if you see people talking about this, correct them. They're wrong. I mean, it's just it shouldn't be getting repeated in 2025. So,
Anya, why is it okay for Temujin Kensu's prior bad acts, such as his repeated rapes and abuse of Crystal, to come into his murder trial? Isn't that not allowed?
This is a really good question, and I really appreciate this person for asking it. Because what we hear often in true crime is, hey, you can be a dirtbag, you can be a scumbag, you can be an awful person, and that shouldn't really come into your murder trial because it may not be relevant. So, for instance, if somebody has a history of, like, you know, being really mean or screaming at let's say someone gets in a bar fight, right? And then they're later accused of a rape murder, right? The bar fight's not really necessarily linked to that. So, you know, you don't want to bring that in just to show the person's violent because that doesn't really have any bearing on the facts of the rape murder case. It didn't happen in a bar. And the effect would be so prejudicial for the jury to hear that, where they're just kind of, oh, well, this guy sounds like a violent guy, so maybe he would do this. It's not fair. It violates the defendant's rights, and so it should not be allowed. But there can be an exception to this general rule. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, it boils down to, is there a connection between these acts and the actual crime? And in this case, the fact that Temujin is making threats, the fact that he has this violent relationship with Crystal, these establish a motive. They explain why he committed this crime. And so that makes it relevant to bring it in. That's not like a blank check. Certainly when we visited the commutation hearing, we learned about a variety of other women who had been abused terribly by Temujin Kensu. And I can say with some confidence, I feel there are other women out there who have not come forward, who have also been abused by him. And it would have been inappropriate to bring in at the murder trial the testimony of, say, Jane Doe saying, oh, he raped me too, because there's no connection between what he may or may not have done to Jane Doe and what he did to the person that he was worried might raise his child.
Right. So, I mean, I'll bring up an example from the commutation hearing. A woman we called G brought up that Temujin Kensu had chased her down. She was on a date with a man, and he physically assaulted that man and was stalking them. And this is after they had broken up. So, I mean, you might say, well, that sounds pretty similar to his reaction to Scott and Crystal dating, and you're right. But it doesn't have anything to do with it doesn't have any bearing on Scott's murder per se. I mean, it kind of does because you're saying, well, it's a pattern of behavior, but that's a thin link. You can't make that work legally. So that didn't come in. They weren't getting that in. All they got in was his treatment of Crystal, which was remarkably horrible, and his statements to Crystal about wanting to harm Scott, and his possessive nature with Crystal and all the threats he made to her. So that has a bearing on what happened to Scott. So therefore, it's okay. And one thing we can all rest assured about is that, you know, the appeals courts in Michigan and the higher courts in Michigan are filled with judges who, you know, scrutinize this pretty heavily.
And I'm sure it's no surprise judges take this sort of thing extremely seriously. They think about it very, very hard, and they look at everything. They don't just look at a couple of newspaper articles or talking points from defense investigators. They look at the entire record. And again and again and again and again, the judges in Michigan who have looked at this case have found no reason to overturn the trial.
So when people say, well, they just character assassinated him with Crystal and whatnot, well, no, they gave a motive. They gave a very strong motive. Crystal's testimony is crucial for establishing a motive. If you don't know the background with Crystal and Scott and Temujin's statements to Crystal and Temujin's treatment of Crystal, you don't really have the motive.
You don't understand it. It's like, oh, what? He just killed a stranger for no reason?
Yeah.
You need to explain.
Or why would he kill this guy who, because, they were broken up. So why would he care about this Scott guy? You have to look at what Crystal has to say. And let's be clear. The jury got to sit through Crystal's testimony. There was the cross-examination. So there was an opportunity for Temujin's side to knock down what Crystal was saying, or to dispute it, or to say, no, you're lying about this, and then for the jury to say, well, I don't find her believable.
And that's actually, I'm delighted you brought that up, Ms. Kane.
Oh, I thank you, Mr. Greenlee.
Because that leads me to a 1993 decision from the Michigan Court of Appeals, which they talked about this bad acts testimony being allowed in. And they said, well, maybe some of it could have been excluded if the defense lawyer wanted to, but they point out that the defense attorney's strategy seemed to be focused on attacking the credibility of Crystal and making Crystal seem ridiculous. And so as part of that strategy, they made the decision to let some of this testimony in so they could then ask questions like, oh, if he raped you, why did you go back to him? And all these other things. And the thing is, if there is a strategy that is credible, and I can imagine in certain circumstances that strategy might have worked, you don't get to appeal strategy that goes badly.
Yeah. Oh, whoops, the jury actually believed her over your client. Well, that's tough. But that's the victim blaming kind of strategy of like, let's put Crystal in the hot seat. Let's put her on trial. It just didn't work in this situation, but it was tried. So, yeah.
They really tried hard to shake Crystal's credibility and say, oh, all this stuff he told you about ninjas, I bet you got that out of a movie. They really tried hard. And Crystal was such a good witness who also had the benefit of telling the truth that the jury saw through those efforts. You don't get to appeal bad strategy.
I think it's a strategy that morally makes me uncomfortable, because also asking things like, why did you go back to him after he raped you? If anyone understands anything about sexual violence, I think we can answer that question for ourselves. That's what happens. That happens a lot. That's very common.
I think we, as a society, thank God, know and understand a lot more about sexual abuse and violence in 2025 than we did in 1986 and 1987.
But the fact is that back in 1986 or 1987, I can understand why the defense attorney went that way. Even if I find it uncomfortable, I can understand why they went that way. It's not even a bad strategy. It's a valid strategy for the time. It doesn't play well now. I think, or in certain instances it might, but I think it's much riskier now. Back then, I don't know. Kind of a roll of a dice, and that's taking a completely amoral stance on it. I don't believe victim blaming is right even in these instances, but I can understand why this defense attorney did it. And yeah, there's no accounting for strategy. This was a strategic decision, and I don't know. It's just it's been looked at. It's been really heavily scrutinized legally. So when people just sort of say, "Oh, bad acts," if the bad act is completely relevant to establishing motive, and it's not, it's just sort of allowed in this instance, it's not a problem. It's just not.
At the UPS Store, we ensure your small biz stands out with a variety of high-quality paper stock options, banners, posters, brochures, and more. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, pricing, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Be unstoppable. Come into your local store today and get your print on.
So here's a question, a little bit of a heated question we got. We'll answer a heated question.
Yeah, this
person was pretty mad in their email, but hopefully
this question amused me.
There is a whole long rant, but I'll boil it down to the essence of, I think, what they're asking. And it's a fair, we'll answer whatever you guys send us. Why did you conveniently leave out the Shapiro concurrence?
The Shapiro concurrence would have changed everything. So
I just imagine like we're playing Uno and someone throws down something in like the Shapiro concurrence, and we're like, whoa, oh my goodness.
So let's talk about this. And first, there's a bit of background.
What the hell is the Shapiro concurrence? Some people may be wondering.
Well, first of all, let me say it's very interesting to me that Team Kensu really is upset if you don't include every single last one of their precious talking points. And they don't mind if you leave out facts that go against them, including huge facts that go against them.
Like a history of rape and violence.
Or tampering with witnesses. So the Shapiro concurrence. First of all, when we talk about concurrence, that is when a case is heard before a court. Oftentimes, you have a majority of the opinion issued where the court issues its opinion, and then some judges will issue what is called a concurrence, where they say, well, I agree with the result, but I have a few other things to say too. So that is what a concurrence is. And one thing that might come to mind right away is that the focus of our coverage was testimony. We were not doing episodes based on appellate decisions. And so the precious Shapiro concurrence wasn't even relevant for that reason alone. And secondly, the Shapiro concurrence is also not super relevant for other reasons. There is a concept in judicial opinions called dicta. And dicta are things that are included in a judge's opinion that don't really relate to the final decision he makes. If I'm a judge writing an opinion about, I think Anya looks good in a big hat, and that's my ruling. And then in the middle of the ruling, I just suddenly said, well, you know what? I also really like Rice Krispie treats. Okay, maybe it's interesting that I like Rice Krispie treats. Maybe that's some sort of key insights into my character. Maybe it gives you an idea how I might rule if I get a Rice Krispie treat-related decision to make. But it doesn't really mean anything because it doesn't deal with the holding. And also, you could make an argument that concurrences themselves aren't really super relevant. Because if you're writing a concurrence, you're basically saying, well, I agree with the majority, but I could not get them to agree with this particular argument.
So you're basically saying no one else agreed with me, but I'm going to riff on this for a minute. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so kind of like you're a podcaster, I guess.
Podcast moment for a judge.
So there was this, I believe it was a 3-judge panel, one of whom was Mr. Shapiro. And they had a decision to make about whether or not a particular set of facts warranted giving Kensu a new trial. And the judges decided no, it doesn't.
So Shapiro included?
Well, he issued a concurrence, which means he joined with that decision.
Okay.
So then he issued a concurrence saying, yeah, I joined in this decision. But and this is paraphrase.
Well, let me do a backflip to show you all.
This is paraphrase. He said, hey, I concurred that he shouldn't get a new trial over this one particular argument. But do you remember, folks, a few years ago when in another court case, this whole thing about prior bad acts came up and another court said that having that testimony wasn't enough to get him a new trial? I would have ruled differently. so
Okay.
Now, there's more to it than that, and if we do appellate stuff, I'll go into it. But so basically, he is making an opinion about an issue that wasn't before him, and it didn't have anything to do with the actual decision that was before him. And I think that this is the big thing that Team Kensu has, is this offhanded riffing by a judge. I don't find that too compelling.
No, it's not. They do this. There's a website that they have where it's like all these people agree with us, and that's like one of the big things. And it's basically like a footnote in a book being pulled out and touted as like a huge deal, but it's not even a footnote would tell you relevant information about sourcing and whatnot. This is like somehow like less relevant than that, because it's basically like, this isn't what we're talking about here today, but let me tell you.
And let's talk about what they were talking about there today. Let's talk about, instead of talking about this concurrence, let's actually talk about the majority opinion of the case. And I think majority opinions carry a lot more weight than dicta in a concurrence. And I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from what the other judges ruled in their majority opinion. Kensu, quote, Kensu argues that the evidence was weak against him. This assertion, however, is unsupported by the record. There was testimony that Kensu had a strong motive to kill Macklem and had threatened to hurt him on multiple occasions. Kensu also made incriminating remarks during his 4-hour telephone conversation with Crystal and in conversations with police investigators. In addition, Kensu made further incriminating remarks to his cellmate Joplin. Although Kensu claims that Joplin recanted, the only thing to substantiate this is the affidavit of defendant's investigator recounting a conversation with Joplin. In any event, Joplin testified on 2 occasions at trial and at an evidentiary hearing that Freeman had made incriminating remarks. Although no shotgun was ever found, Crystal testified that she saw a gun in Kensu's possession that matched the description of a shotgun as opposed to a rifle. A green army jacket was found in Kensu's car, which was consistent with the testimony of the eyewitnesses. The man seen in the bushes and driving away from the parking lot was in a green army-style jacket. With respect to his alibi witnesses, the jury heard that Kensu attempted to manipulate several of these witnesses. Finally, although Kensu claims to have established an airtight alibi through the testimony of disinterested witnesses, a review of the testimony indicates that his alibi was not as airtight as he would like the court to believe. Kensu received a trial that resulted in a verdict worthy of confidence, end quote. So maybe instead of clinging to this Shapiro concurrence, maybe we should start looking at majority opinions of the judges in these courts, because I think if we did, we would walk away with a fuller understanding of this case.
Yeah. And again, well said. I mean, do you want to read this thing from George Mason Law Review about these concurrences and dicta?
Do you want to?
Okay. I mean, you found it, but do you want me to?
This is an article by Meg Penrose in the George Mason Law Review.
Just in case you think we're being overly dismissive of dicta, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quote, good judges are clear writers, and clear writers avoid legal clutter. 1. Legal clutter occurs when judges publish multiple individually written opinions that are neither useful nor necessary. This essay argues that concurring opinions are the worst form of legal clutter. Unlike majority opinions, concurring opinions are legal asides, musings of sorts, often by a single judge, that add length and confusion to an opinion often without adding meaningful value. Concurring opinions do not change the outcome of a case. Unlike dissenting opinions, they do not claim disagreement with the ultimate decision. Instead, concurring opinions merely offer an idea or viewpoint that failed to garner support from the rest of the court. They are cries for attention that are usually better left unwritten. Concurring opinions are legal clutter, end quote. That is brutal, and I love that. But it's also, it's sort of like someone standing on a soapbox telling you their opinion about something that's irrelevant. I mean,
yeah,
but legally, and like I can see where maybe there are instances where you want to do that, but I don't think it means that we need to all take it super seriously in the context of this case.
We don't need to drop everything we're doing to include the Shapiro concurrence.
And Shapiro was basically saying he would have left more of the bad act stuff out, right, in the past.
Well, he thought that the bad act stuff should not have been included.
Okay, even though it goes to motive. Well, thanks for your input, Mr. Shapiro, but...
and I want to talk a little bit more, because I think it's important to talk about this whole question of what should or should not be included when you're covering a case. I was really struck, Anya, when you and I were covering Delphi, that a lot of people who were getting information about the trial from other sources were shocked at the outcome of the case. And I think one yardstick of good coverage, responsible coverage versus bad coverage is, are you given the information that makes you understand the outcome? And that doesn't mean you necessarily have to agree with the outcome, But I would say if you listen to our coverage of the Delphi trial, no matter where you stand on the verdict, you understand why that verdict happened. And I think a lot of the coverage of this Temujin Kensu case over the years has left out so much absolutely crucial information that people are left confused and bewildered, and they don't understand what happened. And I think that speaks to the failure of the press coverage of this case. And one example is this whole thing about him calling, Temujin Kensu calling and manipulating witnesses in order to concoct an alibi. This was literally cited in trial testimony, and it was literally mentioned by a juror in the press as to why they voted the way they did. And yet no one talked about this.
No.
And I think leaving things like that out, that is a huge failure that leaves people confused and not understanding. And I suggest that not mentioning the Shapiro concurrence doesn't mean anything.
Again, this person was very upset with us. I'm not putting that person on blast or whatever, but I do feel like there's an element of like, okay, why are you not upset with anybody else for mentioning like the majority opinion or like anything else about this case that's inconvenient for Kensu? I mean, there seems to be a bit of a cognitive dissonance coming on. And, and again, people ask us about the Shapiro concurrence. We'll talk about it. But I really feel like I agree with you. The mainstream press's coverage of this has been very lacking. It's got a lot of holes in it. And they seem to skirt around a lot of issues that are more negative for Kensu. And that also would explain why he was found guilty and why multiple courts have reviewed this and basically said,
he got a fair trial.
He got a fair trial, and
he's
that's
guilty.
It. Yeah.
We might cover some of the appellate stuff, and when we do, we'll certainly mention concurrences and things of that nature. But one thing that's important to realize is attorneys tend to disagree about things. So the fact that you might have one person saying, oh, this wasn't right, doesn't really mean anything. You just have to go where the majority is.
Yeah, look at the majority. And also, again, I guess it's a situation where I think if we want to talk about things that were left out of the coverage, there's probably more salient things to talk about than this. Again, I'm not...
None of our coverage.
No, I mean the general coverage of this case. And I'm really looking at the mainstream press because it's been... You look this stuff up and it's there's a lot of columns about how Kensu is missing Christmas at home. And there's not really a lot of anything else about what actually happened at trial or in the appeals. It's just these journalists that cover it seem to take for granted and take at face value that this is a wrongful conviction. And he's definitely factually innocent. And that's a bad place to start when you're covering. And it tells me that this media campaign, this sort of media bombardment that's been going on from Team Kensu for years has been very effective. It's been very effective because you have immediately, I think it's like, a journalist sometimes goes into a situation not really knowing the facts, but they also don't want to seem stupid. So they don't ask the right questions. And it becomes like, Mr. Kensu, how do you feel about your wrongful conviction? As opposed to what is your response to these allegations of you raping multiple women? And that's a problem. That's not really journalism. That's just kind of taking a bunch of pre-chewed defense talking points and spitting it back out at your audience.
Or Mr. Kensu, why were you trying to manipulate witnesses?
Instead, it's like, Mr. Kensu, can you tell me how it feels to be such a good person in such a bad position? And it's like, no, that's not good coverage.
Anya, what did we do to research and corroborate what we reported?
Well, we really relied mostly, as you can imagine, based on our statements about the press coverage, we really relied mostly on reading the entire trial transcript and reading the entire commutation transcript.
As well as thousands of pages of court filings. And let me quickly say about that, I would like to try to figure out a way to make some, if not all of that available. The problem is there's a lot of personal information in those files.
So we need to redact it heavily.
And right now we're very, very busy, and I'm not sure. Maybe we can pick out a few highlights here or there.
Yeah, maybe we can do that. It's like we want. I'd love to just do it. Oh, here they are. But I don't know. That's not really responsible given the situation here. And
considering their harassment.
Given the fact that Paula Kensu lurks around and basically stalks people over this case, it's not responsible. I mean, there's people doing horrible things out here, so I wouldn't feel good about that. I would rather, and she may already have a lot of this information, but it doesn't make it right for us to just not redact it and throw it out there for, whatever, public consumption. But we can maybe find a compromise where we kind of take some selections of stuff we've emphasized a lot and put that out there in a redacted format.
And we talked to a lot of people.
We talked to a lot of people behind the scenes. You may not realize that because obviously we didn't do interviews on this, but a lot of people do not want to be interviewed. They don't want to have their voice out there, but they're willing to talk to you about their own experiences. And we talked to a lot of people who we will be keeping private because we protect our sources. If you want to talk to us and you don't want that to be revealed, we will keep you safe. We will keep that off the record, and you can email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. We protect our sources. We talked to a lot of people for this case, and we will not be divulging that unless in the future they say, actually, let's go public. I want to tell you what I know. But yeah, in a case where we're doing a deep dive, we are going to be, at the very least, attempting to talk to a lot of people. If we don't get a response, but we'll be doing the reach outs, or at least attempting to. So, I mean,
as y'all know, we certainly reached out to the Kensus.
That case is, this case is no different in that sense. I mean, and frankly, I feel like in a case like this where there's so many moving parts and whatnot, it makes sense to also talk to people behind the scenes to kind of get a sense of, what's what and what's happening. So, and again, we offered to do that with the Kensus themselves, and, they did not take us up on that request, and then they acted like we didn't talk to them, and it's like, well, we tried.
What a surprise that the Kensus were less than scrupulously honest about that.
I know, it's so weird. It's like a pattern.
What question do you want to deal with next?
Yeah. All right. I guess here's a question. So we got from a listener, and again, thank you guys all for asking questions, even some of the questions that were mad at us. We appreciate you because it gives us the chance to talk about stuff. So this is a question that was not mad at us. It's just, given his pattern of using proxies to harass and attack his targets, what role do you think proxies might have played in his campaign against Crystal and Scott? We know that he had a guy with him when he was stalking Scott at one point. Other than that, it's hard to know. I mean, I don't want to speculate and say other people were involved in the murder because I don't have evidence for that. The evidence points to Kensu. So it's a good question, and it's something I'd be very curious in knowing more about Kensu's social circle at the time of the murders and just learning more about him in that sense. But, other than that, what we've seen it directly manifest in is him getting women to marry him and then basically be his handmaidens of support and, helpmeets who go around and make their whole personality about getting him out of prison. And in a way, Paula is one of them, the latest in, Amiko was before her. She's passed away since. I feel bad for these women on a certain level. I mean, they're doing it to themselves, but it just seems like getting manipulated to spend a lot of time, money, energy, and basically wasting their lives over this guy. So, I mean, in a way, it's tragic for them too, even if they're what we've heard from people is that Amiko was not necessarily harassing people in the same way as Paula, in that I don't know. I mean, from what we've heard from sources, I don't feel like Amiko was necessarily attacking people at that level. It was more of let's get him out. And with Paula, it's been more personal attacks on people.
Well, Amiko did do some things. I'm struck again by in the testimony of Mr. Kensu's daughter. She's in an elementary school, and she's called into the office. Amiko is on the line with the principal, and she's gotten Temujin Kensu also on the line. So she would allow herself to be used to get Temujin Kensu included on calls, which he would not have been able to make directly from prison.
I'm not excusing Amiko. Amiko did horrible and harassing things as well. I guess I'm more saying Paula seems to have a lot of anger about this to the point where she's posting people's cell phones online and including, Crystal's, including her husband's rape victims. So I guess it just seems like she's what we've heard is that she's a more intense iteration of this phenomenon.
Yeah.
And, and that's, again, it's pathetic. I think we need a stronger term than pick me girl for women who do stuff like this. For women who basically fall under the thrall of a predator and then are hurting other women in their actions around their quote unquote activism around it. This isn't activism. This is deranged. Saying this is innocence activism is an insult to people who do innocence activism. You don't see people who are innocence activists in other cases, I hope, posting victims' cell phone numbers and telling people to call and harass them.
Yeah.
You don't see that, nor should you. That's not appropriate. That's not activism. That's being a horrible person. So yeah, this is who Paula Kensu is. I'd be really curious, I guess, just to know if like people in her life just look at her and say like, what is she doing? Or like, I mean, does anyone care enough about her to be like, hey, knock it off. This isn't a good thing for you to be doing. I just don't know.
I would also be curious, as far as I know, no one on Team Kensu has come out and said, you know what? It's wrong for Paula to be putting the phone numbers of rape victims out there. It's wrong for Paula to falsely accuse Scott Macklem of rape. And previously, before we released our episode on that, you could say, well, maybe Team Kensu just didn't know about those things. But now when Team Kensu is silent on those points, it raises other questions. But let's move on. How many potential witnesses did Kensu try to contact and influence? We know of at least 3, probably more. You say he's a serial rapist. How many women did he rape? Again, from the commutation hearing and our own reporting, we know of at least 3, but our feeling is it is much, much higher than that.
Yes. I believe it's higher, but 3 documented, at least in the commutation hearing. And from all interviews that from conversations we've had. But I believe these women. I believe these women in this situation. I'm not of the school that you should just believe rape accusations. I think false rape accusations can happen. But when people are coming forward separately and saying, I went through the same exact modus operandi of a predator, of a rapist, that's pretty compelling.
Yeah.
That's pretty compelling. And I believe Crystal. I believe she has credibility. I don't think her story has changed. I believe these other women, there was another woman who came forward and even her mother was talking about, he raped my daughter. I mean, it's heartbreaking.
Anya, why do people talk about Kensu like he's an incredible person?
I don't know. That's the biggest mystery for me.
That's what I was about to say. I mean, you can go online, and it used to be one of the top hits on Google was this article where it talked about how great Kensu is because, he started crying, talking about puppies. He's just an old softy. And it's like, what kind of nonsense is this? And it also strikes me a lot of the people who have affiliated themselves with Team Kensu seem to have gotten like certain impressions of him. I don't think they've really grappled with the violence or frankly the stupidity. He's not a smart man. One of the myths out there is people say, he's smart. He's not smart. I check in on his Facebook page. The other day on Facebook, he was expressing curiosity about flat eartherism. This is not a smart man.
When you said, oh my God, Kensu's flirting with the flat earth movement, I thought you were kidding. I was like, that's too perfect. That's too much of a punchline. But he's just a conspiratorial nut. I mean, we don't have to be impressed with this. There isn't a conspiracy theory out there that he hasn't like fallen in love with, it seems like.
I don't find him charming. I don't find him smart. I understand that some people do. It baffles me. I don't get it.
He was trying to be a backwoods Charles Manson in the 80s, and it blew up in his face, and he killed someone and got busted for it immediately. He's not an impressive person. I mean, it just why people kind of fall into his sway, I don't know. I think what happened, if I had to speculate, I think people who are good-hearted and care about justice hear a story where this guy would have had to fly a plane hundreds of miles and like get in under the wire, and they immediately make up their minds not guilty, and then they dismiss kind of things that don't sound as good about him or things he says that kind of hit a little bit off. And they're coming from this place of like, he's not guilty. He's not guilty. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And they get the blinders on. That's what happens.
Yeah, then they grasp onto things like, oh, prior bad acts. People are just prejudiced because of the prior bad acts. And no, that's not it. There is specific evidence that ties him to this crime.
I think it was a very effective media campaign that Team Kensu put on where, again, people learn about the case with this kind of crazy plain theory. Oh, the prosecutor must have been corrupt because who could believe it? And that's not what happened. But people hear that, and there's the anchoring bias of immediately like, well, that's what I heard, so that's what I'm going to believe, and I'm going to be suspicious of things that might change my mind at this point. I think that's what we are seeing. I also think there's people who fall into the category of like, I'm basically undecided, or I don't think I would have voted to convict, but I'm not saying he's innocent. And that's, to me, that's an intellectually honest way to be. That's I don't have a problem with people who are just like, I'm not there for conviction. I mean, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I might disagree, but you know, I feel like that's a place where I can understand being. But I think for the people who become very much sucked in by his whole shtick, it's more of like they get hit with this thing, they can't believe it, they hear his version of it, and then it's like some of the stuff just hasn't been really roundly debunked. I've heard people say, well, I've heard both sides already. You know, I don't think the case for guilt really was out there. I looked really, really hard. I don't know what these people are talking about. Maybe they got something that was more down the middle and then pro-innocence, but I don't think the guilt side has really been out there.
I never found anything on it. I've seen some people say, oh, I vaguely remember seeing something about guilt. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
If you find it, let us know. I'd be curious. But I just think people have a hard time walking away from something that they kind of just had this gut reaction to and never really questioned.
All the coverage I saw was, oh, he's obviously innocent. This is one of the most obvious examples of wrongful conviction out there.
I think best case scenario, maybe a couple of articles here and there that were more down the middle, but nothing that was really making the case as it was presented to the jury.
So, Anya, here's another question to ponder. Why do you believe Kensu's terrorizing of crystals and others and his antisocial personality disorder have been ignored by the standard coverage of the case?
I think once a narrative takes root to the extent that it's just accepted at face value, that it's harder for information counter to that narrative to come in and take root. So I'm not saying that people who were reporting that he's obviously innocent were like ignoring that. I just don't think it was coming out. And I think the reason it's almost like a rainforest. Like the tree canopy is so thick, it's not allowing some of the plants on the ground to really grow because no one's looking at that. And frankly, nobody really wants to hear that because it's uncomfortable. And I think I have a lot of respect for people who are in the mode of like, hey, I don't know if he's guilty or not, or maybe I kind of lean towards not guilty, but he did these things. He's a predator and he's a really horrible person. Because I think that's an intellectually honest stance. You know, you can be a bad person and not guilty. Kevin and I are of the opinion that he's very much guilty as charged of murder and guilty of doing these other things as well. So, you know, I think you also, I mean, it's hard. I mean, now people have to be in the, you know, are we going to just, these people who, said he raped them, they're all lying. Everyone's lying about him. Like he never attacked anybody. He never raped anybody. And he's alluded to, I used to be kind of a bad person. But again, the sense I've gotten is that he's basically saying, I used to be kind of a wild guy who had sex with a lot of ladies and they were all crazy about me. And then some of them lied about me and I went to prison. Like, that's not admitting wrongdoing. No. That's a fantasy. You know, like that is a fantasy. I don't think he's really capable of admitting wrongdoing to the extent that he did wrong or making amends or anything like that, which is also one of the reasons I think he should absolutely not be let out of prison ever. But why has this not come out? I think it's just I think I don't know. Honestly, I mean, on some level, it's baffling to me because you were the one who started looking into this, Kevin. Was it difficult to find any of this information?
No.
No? Okay. I think people are getting pre-chewed food from either defense-aligned people or people who are literally on Team Kensu, and they're just not digging more. And like, I'm not saying anyone had any intention of hiding anything. But I think that's
I've
what
said it
happened.
before. I'll say it again. What happened was I read an article. I believe it was an NBC article about the case, which made a number of bold claims, which came from Team Kensu. And those claims were such that I thought to myself, if this was true, he would not have been convicted and he would have been let out a long time ago. Gosh, I wonder what the truth is. And I got my hands on some court documents and pretty quickly realized what the truth was.
I'm going to talk about this later, but I also see it something where, like, I see some of the discourse and people have emailed us this too, where it's almost like people get into the mode once they're so certain of something that, like, they're running everything in that mode through the lens of, well, he must be innocent. I think they're doing that in this case to a kind of insane degree. I mean, everyone's capable of doing that. It's just that, like, I think one thing is that, like, I think when you're doing that, when you're kind of reporting on something, like for mainstream journalists, I think it's like, oh, well, his girlfriend said he was horrible, but, like, I mean, like, she's the one who kind of pinned it on him. So I don't know, maybe she's not to be believed. And they're not really reading through the trial transcripts, and they're not really. How long did it take you? Because you did it first, and then I think I took longer. But how long did it take you, who is a very fast reader, to look through all of this stuff?
I believe the trial transcript is like, 14 or 1,500 pages. The commutation transcript is about 12 or 1,300. And then there's probably another at least 1,000 or more pages of police reports, affidavits, briefs, filings. Took a long time.
So, like, when I'm just going to tell you, when I see, like, mainstream reporters, or when I see people who are, like, opining that this is the most egregious wrongful conviction in the world and, like, lending their quotes to this movement, and they say they read the whole thing.
They haven't.
I don't believe them at all. I don't believe them at all. This is our full-time job, and it took you that long to do all of this. Their statements don't actually match the facts of anything. So, yeah, I don't know. I hope that what our reporting has done and what our episodes have done have at least opened up the conversation to people having to grapple with some of the terrible behavior, even aside from the question of guilt or innocence. That can be a separate conversation. Maybe it should be. But, I mean, it shouldn't be in the case of his bad acts against Crystal and Scott. But it can be with the other women, and it can be with the other people he attacked and hurt. And it can be with his continued horrible behavior online.
And a lot of people talk about ethics in true crime. I think it would be great if people said, let's not attack victims with no evidence. Let's not post the phone numbers of rape victims and encourage people to harass them. Let's not smear the reputations of 20-year-old murdered men. I think that would show a real concern for ethics in true crime, and I think that would also show a real concern about the impact of all this on families.
I'm going to say this. I just thought of it, and it was one of our listeners, and I don't want to just name them. It was on social media. They commented this, and it really, I didn't even think about it, but they summed it up really well, and it was talking about, like, with Temujin and Paula's continued stalking and harassment of Crystal and her husband, her current husband, they're almost demonstrating the same exact behavior that they did with her and Scott. Like, they're doing it digitally. Temujin is in prison, so he can't kill anybody. But, like, the same impulse of, like, you don't get to walk away from me, I will hunt you down kind of nonsense is still there.
Yeah.
So you have to, if people are going to be going around talking about how innocent he is, I think they have to reckon with some of this stuff.
Yes. There's a few questions here that are kind of related. Are you guys mad at people who disagree with you? Or you're in debate the prosecutors, the consultant, inconceivable? What's the dialogue between you and the prosecutors about this case? Not mad at people who disagree with you. We respect those other podcast hosts. We've had very little dialogue with them about the case behind the scenes. The most substantial, I just looked it up, back in the summer of 2023, the prosecutors posted on their Twitter feed something about Temujin being innocent. I sent him a paragraph or two saying, well, here, I think he's guilty. Here's why. He sent me back a paragraph or two was saying, well, I think he's innocent. Here's why. And I think that was the only time we really had a substantive conversation about it. It's perfectly fine for people to disagree. I personally don't feel a debate.
We're not doing a debate, guys. I mean, I really appreciate everyone who asked or to do a round table or whatnot. But, the round table can exist in your own heart because you can just listen to our episodes and everyone else's episodes, one after the other. We're not looking to do these things because I don't know what everyone else knows, and I don't know what everyone else has reviewed, and there might be, the way I see it is our reporting, even if people who disagree with us can inform others' reporting, and they can have a completely different conclusion, but it can benefit everyone in the way that certain talking points can be debunked, and they can focus more on what they feel is stronger about their position. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like, we can clear some of the stuff off the table now that we've put it out there, and they can come into it with a renewed focus of like, okay, but I still think he's innocent because of this, this, and this. And that doesn't require attacking his victims, and that doesn't require bolstering him up to be some sort of, canonized saint, which he's not. So there can be an indirect dialogue through things like that without, I guess I don't, we did a whole episode with Dr. Stephen Novella talking about like debate and true crime and sort of, what's the best way of getting at the truth. I don't think debates and roundtables are necessarily that. I think that rewards people who are the best at debating or throwing their point out there.
That would always be you.
Well, maybe, but I don't know. It's just like, also, I like, these people are peers. We like all of them. I feel like weird about like, come fight us, that's not how we operate, and it's not what we're going to do, and it's never what we were going to do, and it's never what we do in any of our cases. So I guess I don't see that, and I feel uncomfortable with, and again, like, I understand why people are asking for it, and I get that, and we appreciate the interest. It's just, it's not our style. Maybe it works for other people. It's not what we do. We're open to answering anybody's questions if they have questions about our coverage, or, hey, you said this, but where is that in the record? So we're happy to be a resource behind the scenes or in front of the scenes or whatever. But I think you can get people's points articulated just by listening to what their previous coverage has been. And if there's more coverage going forward, maybe now that we put out some of this information, it can be more streamlined on both sides to kind of, I think it strengthens someone's position on the innocent side if they can drop some of the talking points that just aren't true. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
But yeah, no one's mad at each other. There's no divorce. There's no fighting. We're all adults and people can disagree. I think that's really important. I know like we're in a very polarized environment in the United States and in our country, but like I am not going to be like mad at someone for disagreeing with me on this case. I might be upset if someone was like, Crystal's a lying, horrible person and we're going to come after her. That's just bad behavior no matter what you're doing. But I'm not going to be mad at someone for saying, well, I looked at it too and I think he's innocent. Okay, cool. Like, I disagree strongly, but like, that doesn't make me think anyone's a bad person or if someone's undecided. Like, I don't know. Like, true crime shouldn't be like that. It should not be tribal. It should not be this tribal nonsense of let's all fight constantly. It should be like, you think this, I think this is where our ideas are coming from. And I think you're good. I think you're cool. And we probably agree with most of those shows on like the majority of cases.
And it's okay to disagree. I do believe this is not a particularly challenging case. I think his guilt is very obvious, but it's okay to disagree. A couple of questions again that are related. I mean, we got some about how is it legal for Kensu to harass, stalk, and dox his victims from prison? It seems like there has to be a legal way to stop this behavior. We're looking into this. We've reached out to Michigan Department of Corrections, and this is an angle we are doing some reporting on.
And if there's an angle that you want answered, that would help you understand the case better, send us an email. We want to hear about it. We want to look into this even more. and there's an opportunity for us to do some more kind of long-term reporting on it. So if there's something where you're like, it'll be great to get this cleared up, let us know. We want to hear from you. Even if you disagree with us, even if you're like, well, I think he's innocent or I'm undecided, but I would still love to know about this. Let us know. I mean, we'd be interested in digging into it. I mean, again, we feel very strongly about his guilt. I'm open to seeing stuff that could change my mind. At this point, it seems it's pretty overwhelming for me. I would have voted guilty if I were on that jury, and I would have, been surprised if they'd gone the other way.
Ms. Kane, don't you think the real killer would have had to have been less impulsive and more calculating?
So this is kind of a boiled down thing of a couple of different questions we've gotten or, conversations we've had. And it all kind of comes down to the same thing. Don't you think the real killer would have been X? And basically saying that people feel that Temujin Kensu's behavior does not comport with what they would have expected out of the killer of Scott Macklem. And I think these sorts of questions are flawed. No offense to anybody. These sort of questions are flawed on their face because people are essentially by asking this question, they are making up a murderer in their minds. This sort of ideal murderer of Scott Macklem of like what, and ascribing a bunch of traits, assuming a bunch of things and ascribing a bunch of traits to them, and then using that to clear Kensu. I've seen online people sometimes accuse each other of like making up a type of person to get mad at. If people say something like, oh, all these Silver Age Superman comic book fans who, like to wear button-down shirts and, enjoy having a nice hamburger. It's like, what, like who, well, they're talking about Kevin, but,
Sure.
but, what are we talking about here? You're like making up someone to get mad at. I feel like people are making up a murderer to hang this on, instead of going by the evidence. And again, the most common refrain is, well, Kensu's an impulsive poster online. And therefore, he couldn't have waited in a parking lot to kill somebody. Like, do we hear how that sounds? Like, do we hear? It's not a very good point, in my opinion. First of all, we don't even know that he's an impulsive poster. We're looking into this, and a lot of what we're seeing indicates that you're not supposed to have necessarily direct access to social media in prison in Michigan. So if he's not posting himself, then he is somehow getting his thoughts and opinions back to somebody, Paula Kensu, his wife most likely, and she's posting them for him. So that's not really impulsive. That's kind of calculating.
Yeah, he's
if that's
calculating.
True. So or he has somehow managed to flout Michigan rules in prison in order to be posting, which is also kind of calculating. So I don't know. I mean, when people use his kind of internet history and his internet, freakouts about vaccines and flat earth and, Gretchen Whitmer is the devil, that can look impulsive and I can understand why you'd think that. But the mechanism by which he's getting that out there may actually point to something a bit calculating.
And please remember, in the commutation hearing, we heard awful stories from women who had been stalked by him in a very planned and calculating way. I agree. It's just people making up their own ideas and just twisting themselves into rhetorical pretzels in increasingly ridiculous attempts to clear an obviously guilty man of murder. One thing that I found amusing in a dark way, I saw someone say, well, if Temujin Kensu had committed this murder, then it was the perfect murder. By God, the man was picked up for it within a couple of weeks, and he's been behind bars ever since. That's not a perfect murder. This is not a smart man. This is a man who thinks he is smarter than he is. And when you think you're smarter than you are, you do things like believe in flat earth, or you do things like call up witnesses and say, oh, you remember I was there, don't you? This is what stupid people do who don't know they're stupid.
Yeah. But he thinks he's like a genius. I'm going to tell you this, like, that does touch upon what I was talking about with the impulsive versus calculating. First of all of us as human beings are capable of doing both impulsive and calculating things. Just because I impulsively, buy some candy at the store doesn't mean I'm also not capable of, doing something calculated later on. I mean, it kind of just depends on the stimuli and what's going on and my mental state and whatnot. Second of all, I'm glad you said about the perfect murder. That only is true if you assume from the jump that he is innocent. That is not an intellectually honest way of thinking about this case. That is not intellectually honest because you're already saying, well, he can't be it. So the real killer must have been a genius who's still out there and we need to catch him before he strikes again. It's like, no, you can look at it. This is like such an obvious case to me. You can look at it as a guy who has a horrible personality and has done horrible things, escalated to the point where he killed somebody. And because he had threatened that guy and his fiance and had stalked them in a very public way in which people were aware of, he got busted immediately. And that's what happened. And then he went to jail he went to prison for life. And ever since, Michigan courts have been like, yeah, that works for us. I mean, that's a pretty obvious case. Or you can overcomplicate it in your mind like so many true crime people do and say, no, everyone's, I mean, I don't see how you can argue that this case is wrong and see it any way other than it's a massive corrupt conspiracy. Because that's the only thing that would actually make sense in that context. And so I guess I'm just like, or you can, I think it's intellectually honest to be like, I'm undecided based on what I've heard. I don't know if I would have voted for guilty, but there's a lot here. So there's different positions you can take, but I think the one that I find most annoying is like, don't you think the real killer? Yeah, they got the real killer. And he's kind of dumb. And he, got caught pretty quickly. So, I mean, I think the system worked in this case. And people can be impulsive and calculating. And also, like, I don't know, to me, when you look at the history of things he's done to other people, the stalking, the harassment, the escalation, the seeing women as his personal property that he should have domain over, the weird narcissistic views towards his children as like extensions of his own will who shouldn't talk back to him or he'll just annihilate them verbally. I think all of that points to somebody who's very capable of killing Scott Macklem and lying in wait and stalking him as he had been doing and figuring out a way to do that and then gloating about how he has the perfect alibi and how they'll never find the car or the gun, which they didn't, and getting busted. I think it's we don't need to overcomplicate cases. Sometimes they are just what they look like, and I think that's the case here. So, yeah. Again, if you have any information on this case, murdersheet@gmail.com. We'll protect you.
We're going to step back from this case in terms of new episodes. We're going to continue to report on it, and you can certainly expect other episodes on the case to come up.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for the Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.